Welcome to this Considered Opinions podcast.
I'm Dougal.
And I'm Celia. Thank you for joining us. There's a lot of talk at the moment about going cashless, about looming CBDCs, and what that means for society. So today we're going to look at a cashless society, we're going to look at the history of money, and we're going to discuss currency.
I think it would be useful just to quickly define what currency is, what money is. Money in particular has three basic facets to it. It's that it's a medium of exchange, it's a unit of account, and it's a store of value. Currency is kind of a subset of that. It is what we use as a unit of exchange. So it's that which we value. And you could think of currency more broadly speaking in terms of something having currency. It might not necessarily be money, but it might be an idea or something like that. So currency is really something that we give value to.
When we talk about going cashless, there's something that is important to realise is that humans have always had a form of cash, a form of money.
It's prehistoric. It goes back into prehistoric times. A lot of people like to say that we have cash now, and if we don't have cash, we have to barter. But there's never actually ever been a point in history when we are solely dependent on bartering. There's always been some form of cash.
And that makes a lot of inherent sense because a barter system is a cumbersome system. So having some portable means of exchange, humans are always going to come up with a version.
Yeah, and over the years, it's been shells or beads or salt. Yes, it can be precious metals. In the case of jails, people have used cigarettes. Just about anything that you can think of has at some stage been used. Even paper has been used as a form of money.
And this brings us to what money actually is. And money is a trust system. It's the system that says, if I give you X amount of beads, you trust that you can take it down the road and give beads to the other guy and he's going to exchange it for goods.
Correct. And this is what is meant by a unit of exchange. Because if you don't trust that you can exchange the money you have received from someone else for some other good or some other service, then you're not going to accept that money in the first place.
Well, that reminds me of a story of the economics podcaster George Gammon going through South America. And he set himself the challenge that going through South America, he was going to only use Bitcoin or gold. And what he found was that it was very hard to pay for anything in Bitcoin and gold because people didn't have that trust that they could then take it easily and exchange it for something that they want.
Yes, what he ended up having to do was that he would find someone who would take the gold or the Bitcoin, but he would be transforming that into usually US dollars, because that's actually what had currency. That's actually the money that people would accept from him. So he would have to change it from Bitcoin and gold into US dollars, and then he could spend it.
Well, that's an interesting thing about currency, because currency is what we value, but also you have to use it for it to have currency.
Yes.
If you're not using it, if it is not easily usable, it is not currency.
Yeah.
So for George Gammon, he found that even something that we would say has inherent value, like gold, didn't have currency.
Yes, and even those that are, hot on Bitcoin, for George, it wasn't particularly useful as a currency because he wasn't able to readily change it. And one of the interesting things about this as well is that a lot of the countries he's going to, US dollars was not the currency of that nation, but it still had currency in that nation. So what that also shows up is that it doesn't have to be the nation state that dictates whether something has currency or not. It's simply whether the people in that location give it the credence or give it the currency that it can be used.
Money has currency, it has value because we, the people, the users, say it does.
Yes.
And this is something I think that in this age of state-issued coinage or notes, we assume that money has to be state-issued, otherwise it's not money.
And you go back through the history, the very first state-issued money was coinage, minted coins, was the Kingdom of Lydia, somewhere around about 750 BC. Lydia was in the area of what is Turkey today. So prior to that time, you still had massive amounts of trade. You go back to the Bronze Age, people were trading, bringing tin from Cornwall to the Middle East. They were bringing lapis lazuli from Afghanistan to the Middle East. They had to be able to do that with some form of currency, with some form of money. But during the Bronze Age, there was no state-issued currency. They were simply using the precious metals at the time, whether that be tin, whether that be copper, whether that be gold or silver. That's what they were using as money.
And that also brings it back to that, one, it's portable, something that they could easily transport. They didn't have that barter system all the way along. And two, that they had the trust of what they could use. Yes,
they knew that if they used, whether it be gold or silver, that they could use it in Afghanistan to get the lapis lazuli, and they could also then get more gold and silver from wherever they were selling it in the Middle East. Absolutely.
Looking at government-issued currency not being the only way, another example from history is the black markets during 20th century Soviet Russia.
Yeah, this is a good example.
The state wanted to control everything, the price of everything, the amount of everything. Collectivization was the state policy at that time. And it's human nature to not want all of the state diktats. And so people created black markets. They used their own currency. They used old Tsarist money. Whatever it was that had currency at that market or amongst that group of people, that could be used as a form of money.
Well, one of the key things I think there was that there were a couple of things going on. The state-planned economy could not provide all of the necessities that people needed for their day-to-day, so that ordinary average people needed the black markets. They actually needed them. And the elites themselves actually needed the black markets because the elites, like at all times in history, had to have their luxuries. And where else were they going to get their luxuries from? Which also meant that they tended to turn a blind eye to the black markets as well.
Yes. Interesting, a slight side note about black markets supplying luxuries. During the Second World War, the wealthy citizens of Rome lived throughout the war at pre-war levels of lifestyle because of the black market.
There we go. There's another example. Things will fill the space. And I think one of the key things here as well with these black markets is that, or any market really, is that you're dealing face to face with people. And so you talk about it being a trust system. Well, what's more trustworthy than someone that you can see, that you can talk to face, that you can do business with face to face? And I certainly see that with a lot of the online markets that we have now, that we're forever running into issues of, can you trust this person? Can you trust that website? Are you going to receive what you think you're going to receive? You think you buy a Lamborghini car and all you get is a Matchbox Lamborghini car. It might have been a giveaway that it was, $5, but...
It is easier to cheat someone when you have no relationship with them, I think, is the point there. And that kind of brings us to the central bank digital currency that people are worried about happening.
Yes.
Now, the thing is, we actually already have digital currency. We have it with EFTPOS, with PayWave.
Credit cards.
We already have digital currency that we use day to day. Even our banking system is already digital.
You've got all of the elements there for CBDC. So you've got that digital point of transaction. You've got the digital means of account, the ones and zeros on a server.
And you've got the habit of digital transactions.
Yes.
People aren't suspicious of it. They're very comfortable using it. When paper money first came out, it was an IOU, and that you could take to the bank and they would promise to pay the bearer X amount in silver.
In fact, they were called promissory notes.
Exactly. And people were very suspicious when they first came out. And now it's very widely, nobody bats an eyelid at plastic. And so we are very used to this digital currency being used day to day. And so it has the currency for us that we can give and take with it. The thing is, though, is that with digital currency, there's less privacy and there is more control for the facilitators of the currency, whether it is one central bank or whether it is the big five that we have in New Zealand. There is an element of control by the provider of the currency.
I think that's most people who have a concern with CBDCs, that's 90% of the issues that they have with it.
The thing to remember is that we need to keep using our physical cash that we have control of. And remember that we're the ones who give things value. Human beings are very resourceful, and we will create money or currency in whatever situation we find ourselves in.
Yes. There's an element of use it or lose it there as well, that if we continue using cash, then it'll be much more difficult for it to be taken away. And a second point is that even if a CBDC does get brought in, what's likely to happen is what happens in situations where currently where for example, you have high inflationary economies. So people say, take again Turkey, where there's a lot of inflation, people will be paid in the Turkish lira. What tends to happen is people will, on payday, they'll pull as much money as they can out and change it into something that will hold its value, whether that be euros, whether that be US dollars, something like that. And that's actually what they end up using day to day to transact with. There are some things that they have to use the Turkish lira for, and what they will try to do then is that they will try and front load any of those payments for when payday occurs. And if they can't do that, then they still pull the money back out, but they put it back in just before they need to make the payment. So you'll end up having a similar sort of thing with a CBDC, is that people will pull the money, either pay what they have to pay straight up, or they'll pull the money out and transition it into a form of currency that they can more freely use.
And that's, I think, the big key issue with it, is that we have to keep using cash, physical currency, because for something to have currency, you have to use it. And so we have to make sure that stays normalized. And if there are shops that are already saying, I don't take cash, that's a time for us to ask ourselves, well, are we still going to choose to give them our business?
Our custom. It's a great point. And I think sort of associated with that is that we, as a society, have got used to the convenience of just using our EFTPOS cards, using our credit cards.
Well, New Zealanders in particular are great EFTPOS card users.
And maybe we need to think about what we can do to form some new habits. Maybe it will be a little less convenient. Initially. But again, you form new habits, and once you have the new habits, it'll actually still be pretty seamless.
One thing to really remember as well, when people talk about going cashless, we're going to have a cashless society. There's nothing you can do about it is the message that's out there. Do you remember when they talked about a paperless office?
Yeah, so much for that. Still hasn't happened.
We have more paper now than ever before. So for all of their great plans, the whole paperless office, cashless society, it never works out as the powers that be hope it will.
Do you remember the Jetsons? You probably don't remember the Jetsons. I remember the cartoon The Jetsons, and they had it was a futuristic based cartoon with a family, and they all had flying cars, and they had robots doing all of their cleaning. So they didn't have a maid, they had a robot doing all the cleaning for them, and they had video calls. Only one of those three we actually have now. We have video calls, but we still don't actually have robots doing all our cleaning for us, and we still don't have flying cars.
Well, I saw a funny thing, and it said, I want AI to do my dishes and laundry. I don't want it to write my books and draw my pictures.
Yes, yeah, true.
So I think we don't need to be afraid. Cashless, paperless, human beings are actually resilient, and we are also resourceful, and we come up with all sorts of workarounds no matter what situation we find ourselves in. The other thing is you got to use it or lose it. For something to have currency, we have to keep using it.
I think there's also, yet again, community is really important, and dealing with people face to face and building up those relationships.
Because money is a trust system, and we, the users, are the ones that give it value.
Thank you for joining us for this Considered Opinions podcast. We look forward to seeing you again next time, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.